What's good, everyone? Matt here from UK Nets Fans, and today I'm joined by Aidan and Cammy Anderson for another episode of BK to UK, the British Brooklyn Nets podcast. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the NBA schedule being released, or the first half of the season anyway. Media Day, or Media Week, has been going in full swing, and at the time of recording is still going in full swing. But the main meat and potatoes of this episode is going to be taking a look at the roster that your Brooklyn Nets are taking into training camp and just having a bit of a primer ahead of the season just to see where they are and what we think that might come from those players. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and on Instagram at UK Nets Fans, and the pod itself on Twitter at BK to UK Pod. But with that said, gents, how's it going? Good week you've both had, I hope?
Yeah, all good to you, yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, been good. It's been exciting week. There's been so much news coming in. I'm starting to got the countdown for kind of the pre-season games coming up soon. So yeah, no, it's starting to feel real now. So yeah, it's been a good week.
It's around the corner. I think it's from when we're recording, it's sort of 12 days, I think, till the season starts. So it's almost upon us. But the first thing we're going to chat about is the Nets released their first half season schedule. And there's been some key games that have been stuck out. So opening night, December 22nd, we are facing the Warriors with KD going back and facing his old team. On Christmas Day, we're going to go to Boston, where Kyrie is going to go back and see his old team. And on Martin Luther King Day, we're going to see what the Bucks are made out of. Obviously, our closest rivals to the top of the East, hopefully, this season coming. Gents, which of these games are you most looking forward to?
I think the main one is opening night. That is the game that's kind of the one I'm most excited for now. Let's kind of focus on the here and now. Let's not look too far ahead. There's like tons of great games that we're going to have over the course of this season, but I mean, you couldn't write it that KD's going to be up against his former employers in his first game back after so long out injured. And obviously, I think it's going to be a really good game. Unfortunately, we won't see Klay Thompson in that Warriors side, but this is meant to be a Warriors team who are going to bounce back after the kind of mini rebuild last year due to the injuries to Klay and Steph as well. So, and Steph's going to be back for this one. So I think I'm definitely really excited for this one. I think to be the best, you have to beat the best, and the Warriors are quite highly rated coming into the season. I think they're expected to do really well. So, yeah, I'd rather see us kind of test ourselves really soon rather than beat a few kind of diddy teams and maybe struggle when we come up. So, yeah, glad that we're kind of thrown right in at the deep end.
Yeah, I'd say I'm probably most excited for Christmas Day against the Celtics, just purely because I'm excited to see what we can do against solid Eastern Conference teams. I think that's going to be a big thing this year. Obviously, the Nets are kind of sure to be a playoff team, but we need to see the teams that we're going to have to beat along the way. And I think that's going to be a class game. And I'm excited as well because we've not had a Christmas Day game in so long. We're probably due one last year, probably the season before with the team we had. But I mean, it's an honour to be chosen on Christmas Day because it's such a highly watched event. And yeah, it's just going to make Christmas ever so special this year.
Definitely. I think Christmas Day is a funny one. So the way the schedule's panned out, we're going to be playing about 10 p.m. UK time on Christmas Day, which I've said is absolutely perfect. You know, you're a couple of mulled wines in, you've had your big dinner, everything's starting to wind down. You kind of might have another second look at a cheese board or something, and then you can put the game on. I think it's absolutely perfect. I think, yeah, the people that put together the NBA schedule know exactly what they're doing. I think to open the season with the return of KD and the return of Steph on the same day in the same game is absolute genius with them. It's just such a shame that there's going to be no fans in the arenas. That's going to suck. But I think that, that could work positively in our favor. I'm not, obviously I'm not quite sure how hostile the Golden State Warriors fans would be towards KD. I'm sure it's all love, but it's something to consider. But there is a part of me that's like, I really want to beat Boston. Like, there's just something with all this chat of Kyrie didn't come last year because he's scared and all this sort of stuff, when he was obviously suffering with an injury, which he subsequently got surgery for. Yeah, I think I'm toss up between them. But yeah, my head says looking at that Golden State Warriors game is the most exciting, but my heart's like, I really want to give the Celtics a good kick in. But yes, but the opening day can't come quick enough.
Yeah, no, I just think it's, looking at the schedule in general, I think you look at that first week, obviously the Warriors and Celtics is such a test straight away. And then you look at the rest of the schedule, and I actually think for the first 36 games, it's looking pretty good, to be honest with you. I would not be surprised if the Nets find the rhythm early on. If we get to the end of those 36 games and we're in single digits for losses, that should be their target anyway, because there's so many winnable games in there. It does mean obviously the last 36 games might be a wee bit harder, but there's so many winnable games in there. And yeah, it could put us in a really good position come the All-Star break.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on the same train of thought as that. And something else I noticed was, well, certainly in the US, and where there's been a lot of talk of us having, I think, 19 nationally televised games. So my fingers are massively crossed that means Sky are going up their coverage of us this year. I mean, this is absolutely fantastic. A New York-based team, obviously Eastern time, so it works out fantastic for us. Games are going to be on at friendly times, and yeah, if we manage to get as many as 19 games on Sky here in the UK, that would be absolutely unreal. But yeah, just need to wait and see with that. But as Aidan says, I think the expectation should kind of be at least single digit in terms of losses, and yeah, it's going to certainly be a really interesting kind of first half of the season.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I think I read somewhere that in terms, because people always they kind of rank the ease of schedule, don't they? About like how many sub 500 teams you play or something. I think the Nets do have one of the easier schedules when it comes to that. Cammy, you sort of touched on before. Would you rather just play all the not as good teams first, so you find your rhythm? Or do you kind of test your mettle early, really get sort of your teeth back into playing, especially with KD? Is that something that I'm sort of struggling on which side of the fence I kind of lean on? What do you think of that?
I think I'd rather see us have the harder games first, but ultimately, the way kind of seasons go, not just in NBA, but in every league, you're playing all sorts of different teams every other week or whatnot. They're not going to make you have 10 hard games in a row followed by 10 easy games. Yeah, it's no good. And as I say, I'm glad that we've kind of got two tricky games to begin. I'd rather we kind of put down a marker and kind of really show what our intentions are for the season, because you can't really do that if you're just beating the Knicks easy, like in the first few games. It doesn't really prove much. But if you can beat the Warriors and the Celtics, two teams who, as I said, are expected to do well, I think that says a lot about the team. And that'll obviously get their fans on their backs as well. Obviously, not starting as well against the teams that they want to beat and prove themselves against. So yeah, I'm really hopeful that we can really kind of, as I say, put a marker out very early doors by beating these big teams.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think in terms of the schedule, I think just with the way the NBA works in terms of the trade deadline, just because I'm happy with the team we have at the moment, I think I'd prefer to have a really good record going into that trade deadline, thinking that we're in a good position. Plus, it gives guys like Kevin Durant and Kyrie, who have been out with injury for quite a long time, that time to get their confidence back. It sounds so weird because they're such superstars, but it's not going to, I don't think it's going to happen straight away for Kevin Durant. I mean, he's going to come in, he's going to be an impact straight away, but he was out for such a long time. And if you can ease him in with, I see like the first couple of weeks, there's like a back-to-back with Atlanta, games like that, you get him scoring 40 in those type of games. That's where he remembers how good he actually was. And I think if they can get that confidence back, it'll mean going into those tougher games after in the second half, that it's going to be, to be honest, it could be like the playoffs so early on, because you're playing against hard team like kind of night after night, because it looks like that's the way it's going to be. That yeah, if you get them in playoff mode early, kind of in second half of the season, then they're going in for a kind of, they're set up really well going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's a wicked point. I think I was listening to the Brooklyn Buzz, and they had the very super knowledgeable Matt Brooks, who I love, who's a great follow on Twitter. He was saying it's just a nice way that they can you can kind of game plan with all these kind of mini back-to-backs, and it gives all sort of semi-playoff experience to these people that might not have it on your team, which can only really be a good thing. Yeah, so the other way that I think about it is what happens to this team if the Nets start off with a sort of with a losing record. What do you think happens? I know the media have an absolute field day, but do you think that means we'll be more likely to make some mid-season moves, or what do you think will happen?
I think they will panic. I mean, the media is going to be on them, as you say, especially with 19 televised games. It's going to be the talking point on all your ESPN talk shows if the Nets don't start well, because all eyes are on them. But I think the key is to not panic, because we knew when we signed KD and Kyrie, especially after last season, that it's going to take a bit of time for them to gel. They've said it themselves. We'll probably go into that a bit more when we talk about Media Week, but they have said that, KD said they're going to have to find their rhythm, first of all. So personally, I don't think I'd panic too much to say in the first week if we dropped one of the Warriors or Celtics games. But I think there's so much pressure on the Nets at the moment that if they aren't succeeding early on, even if they find themselves, say, the 7th or 8th seed at the end, when it comes to the trade deadline, they may need to make a drastic move. And I think we will see moves, but I'd be much happier if they were sitting at, say, a 25-11 record where they think they're quite confident going in and keep what they have. But I think they could be pressured into making moves if it doesn't go as well as they think it will.
I mean, I'm kind of in two minds about this. I think it was DeAndre Jordan. We'll also discuss the media comments a bit further, but during his interview, something that stuck out to me was the fact that he said something along the lines of, we know we've got kind of outside pressure, but we're not wanting to put any more pressure on ourselves. And whilst a few of them kind of said, oh, we know we've got championship kind of caliber team and we can win the championship. I think that was maybe Nash that said something along those lines. I mean, I don't know if they will panic or not. I'd like to think kind of based on these comments that they won't, but ultimately you can't really tell. And I think until you're in that situation, you can't really say for certain. If we're doing really badly, of course, the media are going to have an absolute field day. But let's be honest, that the sports kind of media is fickle. It goes for all teams. If we win a few games, that's quickly forgotten. The second we lose 1 or 2 games, it'll be, oh, Kyrie and KD are busts. The Nets have done all this and ruined their team and all this. So, yeah, I think we should probably wait until the trade deadline to kind of assess things and not panic too early. If we lose a few games early on, let's just think of as we were going to lose games throughout the season anyway. You weren't going to have a perfect season, and just keep going. We'll think night after night. Let's not think too far ahead. This is a team who have very high expectations and a lot of pressure on them, but also a team, just looking at them, who can do well. So, yeah, we've just got to wait and see, I think.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the right way to look at it. There's as high talent as this team is, I think there's obviously a lot of new players sort of integrating into playing together with new coaching stuff and all that. So it's going to take a few weeks just to kind of get rotations all sorted and get people comfortable playing with each other. So that's going to be, it's going to be a feeling out process. So I think, maybe wait until trade deadline to really, really decide what, who this Nets team are. Is probably the right thing to do. But we mentioned it a couple of times. Let's get into it. It's been media week this week. So instead of the normal kind of big media day that we'd get with reporters going into the HSS Center and snapping photos and all that kind of good stuff, it's kind of been a little bit by Zoom from what I can gather. Cammy, you've been taking a closer look, I know, as well as you have, Aidan. But what have been the main sort of talking? But as we're recording now, it's still going on, so things can change. But as it's been going on, what kind of the main talking points you've noticed been?
I think the main talking point from this one is certainly Kyrie Irving and the way he went about it. Obviously, the rest of the Nets roster have kind of addressed the media via Zoom, but Kyrie opted to release a statement via kind of a PR person. And now, this has led to him getting heavily criticised, but as we discussed it in our UK Nets fans chat, I completely get why he's done this. We know all too well how Kyrie's treated in the media, how his words are twisted, and he's a smart man. A lot of people kind of see this as him being a bit scared, and I don't agree with that. I think that's a lot more kind of fans who don't support the Nets see that, but I think looking at it and understanding Kyrie and the kind of way he is and the way he's treated. I completely get the way he's went about it. And I mean, he's not said anything too extreme. He's kind of said the stuff that you'd expect him to say. And I think that's quite a nice way to do it, because perhaps that's, and I'm not certain of this, but maybe a way of taking some pressure off the rest of the team, and people are now looking at him, all eyes on him, and that's maybe something that could help the team in the kind of early weeks of the season, because people are going to think, oh, look, he said this, he didn't want to speak to the media, he's thinking he's too big for this team and stuff. All eyes will be on him, and this could possibly kind of be a bit of a masterstroke, whether he's purposely done it or not. I think it could work out really well, and could, as I say, relieve the pressure on some of these guys' shoulders that he's playing alongside.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Cammy. I mean, the main talking points I've seen from Media Week have been Kyrie, obviously, in the last couple of days, in the last 24 hours. And obviously, there's been a lot of talk about James Harden. But yeah, in terms of the Kyrie stuff, I understand why he's done it. I mean, the guy's been portrayed as a villain for the last few years, since his Cleveland days. And I can see why he'd be fed up of it. I saw Zach Harper on Twitter. He came out and said that it's his job. It's his job as part of the NBA. When you sign your contract, the media comes along with it. You have to do interviews. It's just part and parcel with the NBA. And then there was a great response from this guy that said, if it was his job, why has he not been sacked yet? And it's a good point. I mean, I can see where he's coming from, but I can obviously see where the media are coming from as well. But yeah, it could, in terms of being a Nets fan, it could be really good for Kyrie. I mean, I always think of Kawhi Leonard as this kind of quiet guy. He doesn't really speak his mind very much, but he gets the job done on the court. And from reading Kyrie's statement, that kind of seems to be what he wants to do this year. Let me do my talking on the court, which I really like. If he comes out and he balls out an MVP standard this season, then the media are going to be praising him all year. And he won't have his words twisted because he's not talking to the media afterwards. But in terms of being on the podcast here, it's not great for us, to be honest with you, because at the end of the day, his quotes are going to be talked about all year long. And let's be honest, some of the things he does say is really funny. So it's a shame we're not going to get... We'll wait and see, because they've not confirmed if this is a year-long thing. He's kind of came out on Instagram and said, oh, believe what you see, and or you can kind of think your kind of own thing. But I think this was just a kind of spur of the moment. He's trying to prove a point, and I think we will hear from Kyrie this year. But I can see why he wanted to do that.
Yeah, I think if anyone's sort of earned the right to be a little bit cheesed off with how the media have treated him, it's Kyrie Irving. Taking a look at some of the coverage that's come around it, the league's media policy requires active players to be accessible to reporters at practices and games. Failure to do so could result in a fine. I mean, I'm sure Kyrie Irving's got a
practice on a game, so
exactly. So they're going to play pretty fast and loose with those. But yeah, I think it's one of those. It's just like, if Kyrie talks to the media, there's going to be a certain element of the media that are going to turn it into something anti-Kyrie. If Kyrie doesn't talk to the media, there's going to be a certain element of the media that turn it into something anti-Kyrie. So why expend the energy? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, dude's just bored of it, man. He does so much good for the community, for the NBA as a whole. The only thing that I think how it might negatively impact the team, again, is not through what Kyrie's actually done. It's just how it's going to be handled by everyone else whose job it is to make up, fill columns and fill websites and blogs and stuff. And if they start, bothering Karis with why isn't Kyrie doing this and what's Kyrie doing this, if reporters can't get to Kyrie to ask these questions, so they start bombarding his mates with those questions, that might just, I don't know, that could ruffle feathers. I'm not sure. But again, that's not down on Kyrie. It's just like, he's said, look, I hope we win. And that's basically like his whole statement was like, I hope we do really well. I want to win. I'm working with this team. And, it was a great statement. And, I think anything negative that comes out of it is unfortunately part and parcel of that, that part of his job, like that guy said. But yeah, it's a bit of a stinky part of the job, unfortunately. Is there anything else that sort of caught your eye with Media Day?
rather than almost blinded me, were Tyler Johnson's teeth. Obviously, got the bag from us with that new contract, and clearly went and got his teeth done, because he opened his mouth and he could have lit up all of New York City. It was, yeah, his teeth were fairly white, but I mean, there was a few good quotes. I've got quite a lot written down here. He admitted that he didn't know how consistent Karras was pre-bubble, which I think was quite nice to see, that a lot of people are now kind of realising Karras' qualities. He said he's ready to take hold of opportunities that come his way and what he thinks will be a crazy season. And yeah, I can't really disagree with that. So after that, we had tons of other people speaking. DeAndre Jordan said a good few things. Probably the most notable one was, I think they look like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. So that's yet more proof that these guys have come back from injury and they're playing how we expect them kind of to play. A lot of people have been critical and asked questions about how good they're going to be post-injury, but that's DeAndre Jordan said it, and so many other people have said that they look classed again, so that can only be good news for us. Jarrett Allen, perhaps a bit worrying for me, and this was maybe the most worrying kind of comment I'd seen, was he doesn't know what's going to happen with his role. He's not been told anything, and now this worries me a little bit, whether that means he's perhaps going to be traded, and that's the reason for kind of radio silence with him. I'm not entirely sure. KD also pointed out that we, in reference to him and Kyrie, know what good basketball, championship level basketball looks like, and hopes his work ethic can help teammates find out who they are. And I think that's a great kind of attitude to have. Obviously, him and Kyrie know what it takes to win a ring. They've won multiple rings, and the fact that he's looking to improve his kind of teammates just by working hard, I think that's really admirable. Trying to think who else. Torian Prince also praised Kyrie and KD by saying those guys are better leaders than people realise. And I think one more thing that really stood out to me was Steve Nash. I'd obviously referenced it a bit earlier on when he said, we realise we're trying to compete for a championship. And then he also said there will be some similarities to the 7 seconds or less Suns with regards to our play style. So, I mean, so much to kind of take in from all those media interviews. And if you've not already listened to them, I would encourage you to do so. A lot of really good kind of content there, and you can spend a good few hours just listening to guys who are clearly up for this season and who know what's kind of ahead for them and what they need to do.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the interviews. I mean, the two standout ones for me, I kind of sat with a few beers and watched them last night. Kevin Durant, it was just not even what he said. I mean, it was just incredible to see Kevin Durant talking about being a Brooklyn Net. I just thought that was absolutely amazing. It's still surreal. I mean, you look at these kind of top-tier sports people, you look at Lionel Messi, Roger Federer, Tiger Woods, you look at these, and they just kind of glow differently when you know they're so good. And he's just one of those people for me. I feel in his interview, he kept his cards close to his chest. He was kind of giving a few kind of short answers. He was just like, yeah, we know what we are. Yeah, we kind of, he didn't say anything too much. I mean, the thing that stood out for me was when he was talking about, there was a lot of questions based on can you get back to that kind of standard of when you were at Golden State Warriors? And he was just like, I can do everything I've done before right now. And it's just like, it does fill you with confidence. The other one for me, just going back to what we were saying about Kyrie, I was laughing my head off last night at Spencer Dinwiddie's media interview. I don't know if you saw the bit about Steve Nash when someone asked him, I think it might have been Brian Lewis, asked him, obviously growing up as a Lakers fan, were you a fan of Steve Nash? Obviously when he played for the Lakers, obviously that was the latter end of his career, and he was like, no, I hated Steve Nash. He was like, I hated him. He was like, he played for the Phoenix, he absolutely destroyed the Lakers at times, so yeah, I absolutely hated him. And I was thinking to myself, if Kyrie said that in the press till Christmas time, it's just like, but I've seen a few people say that Spencer Dinwiddie will always be the best person to interview on the net, just because he comes out with things like that all the time. And not everyone loves Spencer Dinwiddie because he is a bit of a nutter, but I mean, I absolutely love him, and I think he's so funny, and I think his humour and his personality translates so well onto the court. So yeah, if you get a chance to watch that, it's absolutely hilarious just to see that, because usually in like a media room, there'd be obviously laughter if you saying that, but it's just utter silence. So it was just like so awkward, but I thought it was really funny.
Yeah, I love Spencer. Spencer, I really hope he's in net for a long, long time. I've got a lot of time for Spencer. Yeah, hopefully he'll be sixth man of the year this year. But yeah, on a truly stacked roster. But while we talk of the roster, we're going to be spending a little bit of time talking about obviously this is still a little bit up in the air. There may still be moves to be made when it comes to the Nets, but we're going to take a little bit of a look through. This week, the Nets published a sort of a final draft of their roster going into training camp. So what we thought we'd do is, if you're new to the Nets, there's going to be a couple of new Nets fans coming through. Maybe you're a first-time listener to the podcast. What we thought we'd do is we'd go through all the players on this roster and just give you a little bit of a background as to, what we might expect from them, where they might fit on this roster. But yeah, I believe, Cammy, we're going with you first, with a certain Mr. Kevin Durant.
Indeed, we are. So, I think the expectation for Durant from me is take us to the finals. I think anything less is going to be regarded as a failure by the media. And let's be honest, we didn't bring Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in just to kind of remain the same team. We brought them in because we want to become someone. We want to become that team that people fear, the team that people want to watch, the team that players want to come to, and the team that ultimately win championship after championship. And I think it was either Sean Marks, I think it was Sean Marks actually, that had said something about wanting to build something sustainable, that they're not just wanting to kind of be a flash in the pan kind of thing. And obviously Kyrie and KD aren't going to be around forever, but it's important that we manage to kind of build that structure that allows us to kind of compete year on year, even kind of post them. And with regards to what I'm expecting from KD, as I said, take us to the finals. I'm very confident that we're going to see the KD of old once he's back. He is back, I guess, in a sense. So I think we're probably going to kind of see him play all over the place. I think it was maybe Steve Nash who said something about him being able to play anywhere, guard anyone, play anywhere. And yeah, I think it's quite hard in that sense to kind of pinpoint him to one single position. I'd imagine he'll probably play at the 4, but of course we could see him at the 5. We could ultimately see him anywhere. I think the scary thing about this, especially for other teams, is the fact that he can play all these positions and he's so good. You don't get many players who can play 5 positions and do so well. So yeah, huge kind of expectations from me on KD's shoulders, and I'm fully confident that we're going to see a fantastic kind of season from him, and hopefully maybe an MVP season as well.
Goosebumps.
That's it, yeah. Amazing. So now it's my turn to go through with Kyrie. Clearly our starting point guard when healthy, but I think that's just the main concern with Kyrie is his health. We only got 20 games of him as a Brooklyn Net last season, but when he was healthy, he had 2 50-point games, and he still averaged, 27 points a game in those 20 games. So he has the potential to play at an absolute MVP caliber level, I think, if he's healthy, sorry. Because obviously he's in a situation that he loves. He's handpicked to be here, back home, playing for his hometown team, playing with his good friends KD and his good friend DeAndre Jordan. So the conditions are perfect for success for Kyrie Irving. Obviously, scoring is the main thing that he's on this team to do, that and his kind of deep playoff experiences, his champion experience. But I think he's actually going to get more opportunity to show off those offensive talents as well, being kind of offensive option 1A or 1B with KD as well. So now that shoulder injury's gone through and been cleared, the ceiling's really, really high for Kyrie. The only thing that I think might be a drawback is, with all this expectation on the Nets and, being in New York and all this kind of stuff, is does he get distracted or drawn into that kind of media stuff that goes on? I'd hate to see it, because you can see that Kyrie himself is just tired of it. I hope, from the statement he said, he just wants to go in and play winning basketball, and I'm all signed up for that too. I got a prediction for Kyrie for this season is that he's going to average a double-double for the season. That's my prediction. So he's going to score 20. He's going to be a 25 and 10 for points and assists. That's my prediction going into this season.
Nice. So yeah, I took a look at Caris LeVert. Caris, for me, is probably the player that we're kind of most excited to see what he does this year. I'd say he's probably going to be our starting shooting guard this year. Obviously, depending on any injuries, I think that's where he's going to be. He's looking more and more likely like he's going to be the third star that Sean Marks was looking for. Obviously, we've not seen a trade involving him yet. Plenty of rumours, but no trade. And obviously, I don't know if you've seen the jersey promotions. It seems to be that he is going to be that guy. It's going to be really interesting to see Karras this year, because obviously he's improved on everything kind of each year he's been in the league. One thing we saw last year was kind of a real spike in his usage and his stats. I mean, in the playoffs last year, I know there wasn't many games, but he was averaging about 20 points, 9 assists, 6 rebounds, which is, I mean, all-star numbers. I don't think we can expect that this year. He said it himself that he's been working a lot of off-the-ball stuff in pre-season, and I think that is going to be his role this year. If he continues to improve from last year and like the years before, he's going to be an all-star, and it could happen. But I think this year it's going to be a lot of off-the-ball stuff, and I hope that he has improved defensively and kind of in his shooting. The weird thing is, if you look at that kind of predicted crunch time for the Nets, Karras is actually probably the worst shooting in that team, which is weird because he still shoots like something like 36-37% from three, which isn't bad. So yeah, that's one thing this year, is that my slight concern with Karras is that he's not going to have the ball in his hands as much as he would in the previous years, but that's going to be the same for everyone, not named Kevin or Kyrie. But yeah, it's just about getting more effective and more efficient with the kind of shots he has and the minutes on the ball that he has. That the one thing I would say as well is, because of his shooting, we may see him drop to the bench during crunch time, because they may go for someone like a Landry Shamet for shooting or someone like Bruce Brown for defensive. So yeah, that could be something we see this year. If I was to make a prediction this year, I think he is going to take that leap defensively due to his change of his role. We've seen previously he can be a really good wing defender, and I think due to his kind of ball handling roles that he's had in the last few years, we've not really seen that as much because it's kind of taken priority. But I would love to see him take that real rise defensively this year.
Moving on to Spencer Dinwiddie then. Dinwiddie is a player who is going to really intrigue me throughout this season. Of course, with Kyrie injured for large spells of last season, I think Dinwiddie played far more, especially as a starter, than I think any Nets fan expected last season. Whilst undoubtedly a really good player, I think it's going to be a really interesting kind of time seeing how he reacts to not being on the court as much now. I think he is probably going to be a sixth man, and I'm going to go with what you said earlier on and say I think he could quite easily be a sixth man of the year, because he is that good. And I can't remember which one of you said it, but I'm sure in one of the last pods you said he's good enough to be a starting point guard for many of the teams in the league. And to be able to call on a player like that from the bench, I think is absolutely massive. As we've already said, he's a real character, and I think the most interesting thing for me with regards to Dinwiddie will be how he reacts to the change in his playing time. But I think Dinwiddie is a reliable player that we can call upon, and a player who I think will serve us well. And if I'm not wrong, I also think this is his contract year, so that could inspire him to maybe do something a bit more and above and beyond. And he's not the only player in the roster who's kind of in that contract year. So yeah, a lot of interesting kind of things with regards to Dinwiddie.
Yeah, nice. So that takes us on to DeAndre Jordan, DJ. So I think he's going to be our starting center unless Jarrett Allen just goes so ballistic that he completely outshines him and it just becomes sort of forcing Steve Nash's arm. I think DeAndre Jordan and Jarrett Allen weren't actually too far apart last season in terms of quality and what they brought. Obviously, they split the minutes quite sort of similarly between them. But I think with how Jarrett Allen played in the bubble, he was phenomenal. So I think that's really going to push DJ to really earn those minutes and earn that contract. Saying that, he's a veteran presence, and my notes say as a pro he's not as bad as people think, which sounds like a massive dig, but I think, you know, if you watch him, he's still good. His defensive box plus minus is nearly double what Jarrett Allen's is, and he's got a slightly better defensive rating. So that, obviously that's just looking at the box score, but like if he doing the eye test, obviously he's not so mobile. So, you know, maybe with that this positionless sort of switchy kind of basketball we might be playing, it might be a little bit tricky to see if he can translate that over. But yeah, that contract, that sort of lack of upside, him being a decade older than Jarrett Allen, is a bit of something I'm going to keep an eye on. But I think he's gonna surprise people this year on the defensive end with this new sort of style we're going to be going. This kind of making sure we make a shot on the first quarter of the shot clock, so it'll be 6 seconds or less. You know, as long as he's protecting the rim and grabbing rebounds, I think he's going to be a really, really good asset to this team going forward.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with DeAndre. I think he's going to have a really big year as well. Yeah, moving on to Joe Harris. Firstly, I want to thank the boys because it's no secret that we're all massive fans of Joe Harris. So if you can let me gush about him for the next couple of minutes, then I'm more than happy to do so. He's probably the player I'm most excited about this year, other than KD. Like I mentioned for Harris, his stats have increased every year since he's been in net. As we've talked about it so much already on this pod, that he's going to get so many open looks from three this year. And I think he's probably the guy that's going to benefit the most from playing with Kai and Kevin. I can't see much going wrong for Joe Harris this year. Only concern is that he's probably not going to get the amount of shots that he would on previous Nets teams, just purely because it's going to be Kyrie and Kevin that are going to get the majority of the shots, I believe. But it means that he's going to have to make those shots when he gets them. It's funny because, like, Joe Harris, I've always, just from kind of the eye test, he seems to be a guy that likes shooting when he is a defender. I don't know if you guys would kind of notice that. He seems to be that type of guy that he likes when he's getting guarded by someone that's quite big, and he seems to make those shots. And then sometimes when he's open, he can miss them. But I think this year, because he's going to get open so much, it's going to become the norm for him, and I think he's going to be incredible this year. We've seen a rise, especially last season, in his getting to the rim and his defensive end. I mean, for a guy that's not that big, the amount of blocks he gets is actually pretty good, and he always seems to give it 100% at the defensive end, which is exactly what we need from guys surrounding our stars. I'm going to stick with my prediction that I've said to you guys over the last few weeks. I think he's going to be shooting over 50%, but if I'm going to be specific, I'm going to say he's going to shoot 52% from three this year. And yeah, that's surely a record breaker for the amount of threes that he'll actually take. But yeah, no, there's a few bookies in America that are saying Joe Harris, this amount of odds for over 43%, and put your life savings on it, because this guy's gonna go lights out this year.
I mean, fingers crossed, I'd quite happily accept him shooting 52%. So I'm now going to speak about Jarrett Allen. Now, he was one of the players who I was referencing when I'd said about contract years. Jarrett Allen, I think this is an absolutely huge year for him, both in terms of just development and his career, because at the end of the year, he's either going to have proved himself to have earned a contract for the Nets, or he's going to have not done as well and not be a Net any longer, and he'll need to have done well enough to have got a contract elsewhere. And now, as you say, Matt, DeAndre Jordan's going to be the starter, so I think Jarrett Allen's certainly got a lot to prove. The addition of Amari Stoudemire to our coaching team, I think that's going to be huge for kind of all our centres, but perhaps more so Jarrett Allen, given he's the youngest of the, well, in fact, we've got Claxton as well, but kind of the ones that will play regularly anyway. I think Jarrett Allen, I think I've said this in one of the previous podcasts, his usage will be dependent on the kind of teams we're playing. I think, as you said rightly, Matt, him and DJ's kind of playing time was split quite evenly last season, and I think it will kind of be similar this year, depending on the level of opponent. We might see Jarrett Allen come in that bit more. I think certainly for the bigger games where we need that bit more experience, we'll see DJ get those extra minutes. But I think it's a position that's really open, and perhaps a position where I think there's not an absolute guaranteed starter at it for the whole season, unlike in other positions like point guard, shooting guard, small forward and power forward. So yeah, I think it's going to be a massive year for Jarrett Allen. Obviously a huge fan of him. Was great in the bubble, and who doesn't love that afro? So yeah, fingers crossed we see a fantastic Jarrett Allen this year.
Yeah, it's all about that head and shoulders apparently. So maybe I'll give that a go. So yeah, moving on to a new addition to the Nets this year is Landry Shamet. I really like the look of Landry Shamet. Obviously, I didn't watch a load of him last year, but he seems super. I think he's 23, but he's had plenty of experience on a good Clippers team, which, you know, for a team that's got aspirations like the Nets have, I think that's going to be really, really valuable. And he should be able to slot in at the 2 nicely. He's a 3. He typifies 3 and D. He's actually top. I think I read somewhere that he's top 15 in like players, active NBA players at the moment in 3-point percentage, and he's also he's got a reputation as a good defender. So he's going to be absolutely brilliant to put sort of alongside Kyrie Irving, and probably more likely with Spencer Dinwiddie in that second unit. In terms of like cons or drawbacks or things that I'm worried about, I'm not sure, just surely because I haven't sort of seen him play too much. But I think, you know, maybe chemistry and all that kind of stuff might be the only thing that might hold him back. But I think we could almost be talking about the best Nets 6-man could be between Spencer Dinwiddie and Landry Shamet. That's how, you know, he's got sort of, he impacts both ends of the floor. So that's my sneaky prediction for not 6-man of the year in the league, but like in terms of the Nets, he could be our 7th man of the year.
Yeah, so you guys got to talk about the Kings of New York and talking about Kyrie and Kevin, but I get to talk about the Prince of New York. So I'm going to move on to Taurean Prince. I didn't plan that, actually. No, I just came up with that there in my head.
Gold, mate. Solid gold.
Solid gold. We know what we're kind of getting with Taurean Prince, but do we to a certain extent? I mean, if you were to search Taurean Prince at the moment on Google, like, the words that are linked with him are Taurean Prince and salary dump, which is interesting, because usually for the Nets in the last few years, salary dump is usually things that we're taking on board to gain picks. But there's been a few people talking that he could be someone that we could dump to take on less salary, and maybe someone else if we maybe give up a pick or something. But Zach Lowe from ESPN said that he doesn't think the Nets should do this, and he doesn't think the Nets will do this, which I personally think is a good thing. Guys like Prince is the type of player that we need this year. And I hope that playing with KD and Kyrie can get him back to his basic game as to why we brought him in Atlanta, was 3 and D. I mean, in Atlanta, he was one of the best 3 and D options that the Nets could bring in, and they did. And we saw his best minutes when he was playing that role. He's decent at shooting 3-pointers, but he was forcing up so many shots last year. There was at times, I mean, there was a game that me and Cammy were actually at against Charlotte, where it was just it was Charlotte, wasn't it?
Yeah, Charlotte.
Yeah, Charlotte. Yeah,
a couple of beers.
Yeah, that was a couple of beers. It was one of those teams, but he just felt like he was shooting up shots all the time, and he was forcing them. And I don't think that's his best game. I think it's best when he kind of just lets the game come to him. And I think this is what we need from Taurean this year, and I think that's how we'll see the best of him. One thing that doesn't get talked about too much, he's such a good rebounder. Obviously, he had his best numbers as a rebounder in the league last year with the Nets because he was mainly playing power forward. But he gets the boards, and we're going to need that this year, especially when we're going to have so many players around the perimeter. If he doesn't find consistency early, it could be a real issue for Taurean Prince, and he could see himself slipping out the rotation really quickly, just purely because of the competition that we've got in that team. So he needs to take less improbable shots, but that's the thing. He's not going to have to this year, because if there's 5 seconds left in the clock, it's going to be going to one of the 2 guys. But if I was to predict something for Taurean this year, I think he's going to win over the Nets fans. I don't think there's going to be as many eyes on him this year because he's not going to have the ball in his hands as much. But I'd love to see him turn around his form and live up to his contract.
I mean, yeah, I think everyone would like to see him live up to his contract. As a player who we know can do quite well, and I think he could be a more than serviceable piece. So I'm going to talk about our defensive dog, Mr. Bruce Brown, one of our new acquisitions for this season. Now, I'm not going to claim to be some Bruce Brown know-it-all. I know very little, but certainly going off of his comments and what everyone else has had to say and the kind of limited stuff I have seen, you can tell this guy is a top defender and a player that I'll probably be a second or third string shooting guard, depending on probably the situation. I think it will be between him and Landry Shamet for that kind of second unit again, depending on the games and depending on the time in the games, because I think he could be a really good player, especially in crunch time when we need to get shooters out on the floor. But at the same time, the other team are going to be in that kind of situation where they're needing points. So I think having that kind of balance could be great. I think offensively, he's kind of come on in the past year or so. I have seen a lot said about that, and I'd like to hope that he could kind of build on that this year and add kind of more to his game, become a kind of two-way player, which I think you can never really grumble at. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him. I think he is going to be maybe a top defender this year, and that's going to be my prediction.
Love that. I hope so. Bruce the Barnacle. I love that. So that leads me on to TLC, the probably the most handsome member of the Brooklyn Nets. He's a frustratingly handsome man and super smooth with that French accent. So got sort of asked to do a lot last season. I think, talk about positionless basketball, I think he probably played every position for us in some way, shape or form for the Nets last year. But I think, where he'll end up is probably playing the 3 for us. And hopefully he'll settle into that and get a bit more consistency. I think he's probably got the potential to be the Nets' latest kind of G League reclamation kind of project find. He was developing quite nicely in the bubble. He averaged 16 points per game, but he is super, super streaky. He's as likely to go red hot from deep as he is to foul out in the first half in the next game. So that's something to keep an eye on. But I think with next season, it will be between him and someone like your Kurucs to finally sort of find that those solid rotation minutes towards the end of the bench. But yeah, I'm hoping for a bit more of a solid start and a solid season from TLC this season.
Yeah, Twitter was mad for TLC during the bubble. They were just like, it was either 0 or 100. It was like, oh, why is he here? Or, oh, he's amazing. Yeah, I'm going to move on to Jeff Green now. Obviously, another new addition to the team. Kind of a low risk, potentially high reward type of signing, which I always like. He's one of these guys that he's came to the Nets to try and win a ring, which is, I find, really exciting that we're starting to get these players that are coming to try and get that ring before they retire. Jeff Green, I mean, he's played the majority of his career as a power forward, which I think most Nets fans would probably be hoping that be what he's coming in to do. But from kind of listening to Media Week, it sounds like he is going to play the majority of his minutes as a small ball 5. Now, moving on to what Cammy said earlier about Jarrett Allen, that could be potentially where he loses some of his minutes this year, is when they are going small ball and they're playing someone like Jeff Green at the 5 or KD, say. When he played for Houston last year, he gave some really good minutes as a small ball 5. He was getting about 12 points a game or so. He played in probably what's going to be a similar system. Obviously, they had Mike D'Antoni. Mike D'Antoni is going to be a big part of the Nets offense this year. As I said, when he put in his media day presser, he says that he's here to win a ring. It's a great attitude to have in the vets, I think. Always go back to Jared Dudley, one of my kind of favourite vets we've had over the years. When he had Jared Dudley, what a guy. Killed to have him back in the team. Lakers have got a real asset there. But to have that type of Jared Dudley type character in the team, it always falls through to the young guys. If you ask any of those Nets players about the kind of big character guys in the dressing room, it was always Jared Dudley. And I really hope Jeff Green can kind of be that type of character for this year. But in terms of on the court, he's going to impact both ends. He can stretch the floor, can defend well. The only issue with him is, especially if he's going to play small ball 5, is that rebounding has never been a really good thing for Jeff Green. It always seems to be an issue. I don't think he's had over average 5 rebounds in a game like in any season he's played, which could be an issue because as I mentioned earlier, we're going to need guys that can need to get boards this year. I think Jeff Green, he's going to be that type of guy that we may not see many minutes in the first 3 quarters, but in that fourth quarter he could come on, which was similar to what Jared Dudley did, where he kind of had very few minutes. But when they're trying to kind of get those games at the end where they're just trying to hold on to that victory. He might be that type of guy that's going to be playing a lot of minutes in the fourth. And I think, when we're going small, he's going to see the majority of minutes at the 5.
The final player for me is Nicholas Claxton. Now, I feel really bad for Clax, a player who we're all very fond of, a very promising player who seemingly has a really high ceiling, but whether we're going to see him really kick on this season, I really don't know. I think we're probably going to see him split his time between ourselves and Long Island. I've already mentioned DJ, there's Jarrett Allen, and Aidan's just mentioned Jeff Green there. All options who can play at centre, and I'd probably have Claxton sitting at that 4th choice centre option right now, which is far from ideal. So, yeah, I mean, it's a real shame for Clax. I mean, whether we see maybe change positions to try and get more minutes, I'm not too sure. Perhaps play his power forward. Of course, he'd maybe need to improve in his shooting if he is going to play there, but he's a big lad and a likeable character as well. And as I said at the kind of top of my introduction for him, I feel really bad for him. He's maybe a player who I think if things aren't going well, he could be packaged in a trade just due to the kind of promise he's shown. As much as I'd love to see him kind of progress and become a key player in this next team. But yeah, lots of question marks regarding Claxton from me.
Yeah, fingers crossed he finds some time to shine. And talking of shining, he got a new contract, he got a new teeth. I'm talking about Tyler Johnson, likely to be our 3rd string point guard, but come play the shooting guard too. He's on another really super team-friendly contract. I think he's on the same contract as Jeffrey, so he's on a vet's minimum, and he's looking to prove himself. Obviously, he got that massive payday in Miami that we almost paid for, that $50 million contract. And he subsequently bounced around. He went to Phoenix and got waived before we picked him up to go into the bubble. But, he's looking to prove himself, and he seemed to find his rhythm with the Nets in the bubble. He's, especially offensively, he looked really, really sharp, and he looked like he was kind of growing in confidence, which was really good to see. The con would be it's very busy at his position. And he's really leaky on defense. So my prediction would be that it's going to take some sort of injury, and knock on wood that doesn't happen. It's going to take some sort of injury for TJ to play any meaningful part in this season. I hope it doesn't happen, but that's just my gut feeling.
Yeah, he's not a bad option in terms of, say, like a 3rd or 4th option point guard. But yeah, you're right. It's definitely going to come down to injuries if he's going to see many minutes this year. Moving on, finally, to Rodions Kurucs. As a fellow European, I mean, you've just got to feel sorry for Rodi. I just don't think that the Nets is the right team for him. He's probably right at the end of the bench in terms of options. It could be that impact 3 or 4 that we saw in the last few years, when we just needed that type of gritty player to come in. But after we saw a drop in his minutes in the court last year, and the type of team that we are this year, I just don't know if we're going to see much, if any, minutes at all for Rodions. I mean, he's still in the team, and he's one of the few guys that are over 6'8", which could play to his advantage when we're playing against bigger teams. He's still young. He could take a leap this year just due to his experience in the year, in the league. Decent shooter, tenacious, doesn't lack confidence, that's for sure, which we've seen over the last few years. I'd love to see him come back this year and have a few games like he did. I always go back to that game against Blake Griffin, where he was running Blake Griffin all over the court for the Pistons. He was kind of lobbing the ball over his head and stuff like that and running on. It was great. And at that time, we really thought that we did have the steal of the draft. We were picking him in the kind of mid-40s. But yeah, I think I would not be surprised if he's gone by the trade deadline this year, which is a real shame, but I do think he's good enough to find a team in the league. I mean, obviously, he's had a lot of personal problems when he's been at the Nets. He's been in and out of court. But in terms of on the court, he's very, very raw. And he has still a lot to learn about the game playing in the NBA. He's got really poor decision making. He was called for travelling an excessive amount like last year. I know they kind of slightly changed the rule, but He was getting called, seems to be any time he was on the court, and he wasn't on the court for very long. But yeah, there just doesn't seem to be one thing at his game that he's really good at, which is a shame. But I do think if he can find some consistency, your teams like your Charlottes or your Knicks could do with someone like that just as a project. But I think, yeah, Roddy's going to be away this year.
Yeah, rookie Roddy was something else, but yeah, I hope he does kind of find some form, whether it be on the Nets or not. The Nets did obviously sign a couple more players to some Exhibit 10 deals this week, but I think, you know, we're one Woj bomb away from, you know, all this kind of going out the window, and we're going to trade up. So we're going to wait and hold judgment on those. Fingers crossed Chris Chioza makes it onto this team for next season. But that's it. That was our roundup this week of the Nets roster, what we might expect going into training camp and hopefully next season. Thanks as ever for coming on and joining us. I hope you enjoyed listening. Hope you enjoyed watching, and we'll see you next time.